call this meeting of the Town of Boothbay Board of Selectmen to order. First thing that we have on the agenda this evening is John Seeger from the Boothbay Regional Water District.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Last time we were here, we were here to talk about putting a possible merger of the South Pole water system with the Boothbay Regional Water District, which you approved in the Boothbay ballot. That was approved. Went to the legislature, and I got a few people here I'd like to introduce to. We need to come back to you though and get some information, or have you have some stuff done, because we need now to actually put the measure out in front of the people. To my left, Smith Kleinman. He's he's a commissioner from Southport. He was on the board that helped, do the legwork to find if it made sense to amalgamate the two districts. To my right is Kirsten Hebert. She's from the Maine Rural Water Association. I'm really going to turn it over to her. We hired her to help coordinate getting it on the ballot, because we don't not only have to do it in Boothbay, but we also have to do it in Boothbay Harbor and Southport, and it all has to happen. We want to get everything on so it's on the same day, which is November 6th. So I'll turn it over to Kirsten. There's some milestones and some things we have to do, so she'll take it from here.
Good evening. My name is Kirsten Hebert. I'm with the Maine Rural Water Association. And if you don't mind, I'd just like to pass out a little packet of information. What's included in this packet is a copy of the final amended charter of the Boothbay Regional Water District. There's also a little memo on what the impending timelines are, as well as some calendars in the back that show where they actually stand on the date with respect to those timelines. As memory serves, I think, the actual order of referendum vote, the public hearing notice, as well as the warrant language, which has all been vetted by our attorney to go through this process. It's up to date with the election laws. I just wanted to make this process as easy as possible for you. Within the packet, there's well, granted your copy is white, but I believe it's the second sheet behind the stapled packet. And that is the impending timeline for referendum vote. So 45 days prior to November 6th. That's our first deadline. So essentially, on or before Friday, September 21st, we would need this select board to put forward to the clerk, the town clerk, the order of referendum vote and public hearing. That's our first deadline. So we've got a little bit of time, but we wanted to come to you this evening so that we weren't right up against that deadline, in case you had questions and needed to go through the documents, obviously. And then also you'll see, take a look at, I've printed up some calendars that are there in the back, and I've got them all marked per date as to what has to happen on or before certain dates. So the notice of public hearing, it's a 7-day notice. That would be on or before October 19th. And then on or before Friday the 26th, which is 10 days prior to the November 6th election. You actually have to hold that public hearing on the referendum issue. And I would suspect at that juncture, both John and I would also suspect many other members of whether it be trustees or water commissioners would come back to be able to answer questions during that public hearing, should the public have any questions about what the merger should mean.
Now, Kristen, are you talking joint meeting or separate?
They have to be separate per each municipality. That's right. So we get the privilege of doing this 3 times. Yes, we'll be well practiced by the time we get around to the last one. Okay, so those are the most immediate deadlines for us to come to you and ask that you please put forward that order of referendum vote. That's what essentially starts the ball rolling so that come November 6th, this question can go to the voters. Each of the voters that are legal voters, they're residents of the town of Boothbay, will be able to vote on the referendum question. There's no need to create a separate list of voters. So we just simply put that forward and use the same election procedures. The town clerk obviously will know the election times, the poll hours, it will follow exactly what the national election is. The district is responsible for the cost of the referendum vote. So certainly, there was also a question as to whether the district needs to get ballots printed or whether that's something the municipality does, and we reimburse the municipality. So whatever's easiest, whatever is common practice, if you could let us know that, that would be very helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you. And I've also sent forward all of the legal documents in the back, the order of referendum vote, the public hearing notice, and the actual warrant itself with the return. I've sent those to your elections clerk for her to have a look at beforehand also, and she certainly seemed as if it was a familiar process for her. It's not her first rodeo, so to speak, so.
I'm going to bounce this off of Bonnie, but if this can appear on the same electronic ballot as everything else, then would you just ask the water district to pay a percentage of whatever?
Portion of whatever.
Right, because we'll have election clerks and we'll have ballots printed anyway, so.
Two questions.
You want me to do the referendum questions themselves
Yeah.
specifically? As per the charter that I've passed out, which is the first page in that big stack of stuff that I've given you tonight, there is a Part A and a Part B. Part A authorizes the question to go to the voters. And the first question that's authorized for this particular section, for this referendum, is whether or not the voters support the merger of the Southport water system with the Boothbay Region Water District. Now, we need a majority vote in each of the towns. It can't be that just Boothbay and Southport vote yes and it goes forward. We need a majority vote in each of the 3 towns. Once that happens, then we have to go forward with another referendum, which is a question to the voters as to whether or not municipal officials may serve, either appointed or elected, as trustees on the Boothbay Region Water District. So it's an if-then. We're not able to run both the questions at the same time, but let's go with the happy assumption that this question passes November 6th. We would very shortly thereafter come back around and go through this process one more time, ask you to do the order of referendum vote, public hearing notice, and then the warrant. It's approximately a 45-day, or no faster than a 45-day process. So we would anticipate probably the spring of 2013 to come back to you and then hold that election to ask the question of the voters about the municipal officials being trustees.
What we're looking to do is to hopefully have a special election prior to the town meeting, because it would be our hope, if everything goes okay, to get our trustees in sync, the way the charter set it up, so that all the trustees are turning over, in
Staggered
the right cycle.
elections.
And if the second one goes through, then we can have, when the election comes up in Southport for their town meeting, they can elect, along with us electing our particular representatives, they'll have the opportunity to elect a representative, and then we'll fall right into line with the appointed ones, and then within a couple of years, they'll all be elected officials.
I'm just looking at the timeline.
Yes.
The first interim trustee would be up in November of 2013, but Southport, their elections are in March, right, Smith?
Our town
So
meeting.
why would you go 6 months?
Oh, we will.
18 months?
That's the plan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're looking to hold the second referendum, which would be, the cost would be totally borne by the district. We'd probably get the ball rolling shortly thereafter the November election and start the time clock working. It will be a completely special election, one question, but in order to get our trustees on the same, to get them on the same cycle, which is what the charter says, it will, we kind of got to pick it up before town meeting and go through this process once again, so we'll be back. hopefully.
I was just thrown a little bit with looking at that, 'cause it's got November 2013 for the first guy,
It does, yes.
2014 for the
Yeah.
second one, and then they had our delay.
And I did that, I fess up to that, I did that operating under the assumption that you start immediately almost with November 7th for interim trustees for the town of Southport. So those dates will adjust according to how quickly they can move.
Yeah, the first board from Southport is very similar to the way that their board of selectmen will appoint two. And until those get picked up in a regular voting cycle, they'll stay appointed. And then it'll get on a cycle and they'll be regularly, voted in, voted out, whatever.
Do you foresee any problems with any of the towns?
We're trying to make sure that everybody's aware. We want to be available to answer any questions and make it as smooth as possible for the towns to get the questions on the ballot. Is that a good political answer?
I would think that if the town of Southport wants in, it'd be a no-brainer to say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's his job to convince other towns of the same.
Well, I just want to say, that's Smith's job.
I'm not really too worried about Southport. I think I've had a lot of response from people already, even though this is only in its infancy. And the most common question I'm asked is when, not if. So
Yeah, we have to go out and
I'm here to just help you guys realize that we're in. We're all in on this.
They've been getting their water from you folks.
Well,
It's correct.
for seasonal,
Yeah, seasonally for several years.
Yeah, this is a real win-win-win proposition, but it's up to us to get the word out on the board. Obviously Southport is a town, 13 square miles with 2 fire hydrants. And that's just not acceptable, and the groundwater is pretty horrible, to put it nicely. So, everybody's waiting for the seasonal water to come on, and they need potable drinking water. Southport has a height of land that nowhere else on the peninsula sits that equals Mount Pisgah. And so we need additional storage for not only Boothbay Harbor, but parts of Boothbay, a good section of Boothbay. For fire protection, we need another 500,000 gallons in storage, which we've been lacking. That is the perfect place to put it.
6-inch differential between our standpipe and Mount Pisgah. It's
Really?
beautiful.
Wow.
You can feed Boothbay from Southport.
Oh, easy.
No problem.
Yeah. The other thing too is, from boards of selectmen's point of view, right now between Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor, you pay 30%, you pay 30% of our operating income by law.
Right.
You put Southport in the mix now, you just took a chunk of that and threw it over there. So Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor, their burden becomes less. We've got a larger, we'll have a larger base of customers that we can spread. We carry about $8 million worth of debt, and that's normal. Because we can't build in capital improvements into our rate structure, so we bond money. We've gotten a lot of grant too. A lot of work has been done. Been very successful with grants, but Southport comes as well as 510 customers that we just spread our debt load to. Granted, we're going to do a lot of work in Southport, but Boothbay Harbor, when they came over, we did a lot of work the last 10 years in Boothbay. They're picking up part of that debt. The Board of Trustees, it's really cool working for them, is they don't look at it from town to town to town. They're looking at it from a district perspective. What's the right thing to do for fire protection and drinking water for the district? Where's the businesses? What needs to be done?
So John, do you see an immediate, once they join, do you see a rate reduction or no?
We'll have to look at it for sure. Because that's going to be required. We're a regulated utility, and we're going to have to look at it. Do I think it's going to happen? No. But instead of a rate reduction, the rates will stay. We've been pretty good. We've actually kept rates pretty stable, but this will just enhance that because there's a bigger, wider field to pay the rates. So cost per unit goes down, and there's a lot of positives, but it's up to us to really get it out there, get the word out. And thank you very much for letting me go on.
tonight then, right?
No, I was just gonna say, what do you need for us other than a motion?
That's it, just simply the fact that the order of referendum vote and public hearing gets signed and sent to the town clerk during business hours prior to September 21st. That gets the ball rolling. Yeah.
Our next meeting will be the 10th, so I would say we put it on the agenda for the 10th and get the notice of the public that you intend on looking at it then, and then you could do your public hearing after that date, or does it?
Yes, and the public hearing would be
Just has to be
by
7
the
days
19th
prior.
of October.
Well, maybe we tag team it like we normally do most issues, where we have a public hearing on the same night that you have
When we move on.
when you move on it.
Yeah.
So we could theoretically do this on the 10th, and that way it gives John and his trustees some time to plan on when they should be available.
We'll be available.
I will verify that there's no, typically it's an honor before 7 days prior to said time. I want to be sure that there's no, but not 20 days before. Yeah, the bookends for what that time
You
period is that
can't
you
do it
can
too
do a
early.
public, exactly. And I'd like to verify that, just before you set that up, if you don't mind.
Sure. So we just go with the intent.
Yeah,
that that's
check
what
that
we're
out,
doing.
because we normally do public hearing at a regular meeting, so kill two birds with one stone, but
Okay,
make sure that's gonna be all right.
yep, we'll do.
That would probably work for everybody too, because you guys meet
Wednesday.
Wednesdays. I know our board and Boothbay Harbors both meet on Monday, so if both public hearings seem to be held the same night, that'd be a little tight for you guys, I would think.
We'll divide and conquer, We'll make it happen, one way or
You need
another.
help, don't you?
You send the assistant water district manager there?
Uh,
It's just a joke.
Find
I'm
some
sorry.
other trustees.
We could talk about it.
I wish I could, but.
Yeah, leave that alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
That'll
No.
get rerun on Channel 7 100 times.
The earliest we could, I mean, you could move on it tonight, obviously, but if you want to do tandemly the public hearing and the action, then September 10th would be a good intention. We'll just work it out with John.
We shouldn't, in my opinion, we shouldn't do it tonight only because it wasn't on the official
Right.
agenda.
Well,
Right.
Take this
So
point
we
from
plan
that,
on
right?
the 10th unless we hear differently. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good? Good.
Yes, that's why I skipped it.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Next on the agenda, the approval of minutes of the previous meetings of 8/13/2012.
follow the pack.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes.
Can I just ask you to tell me who made the motion? You
I did.
seconded it?
I second it.
These two were talking, I missed you.
You have to know how to do that.
Everybody on
I will ask them again. like to do that.
Public comment? Later on. Reports, Jim.
First thing is that I apologize for missing our last meeting. It's the first Board of Selectmen meeting I've missed in 4 years. Appreciate your patience. So most of what I'm going off of is in your packets from the last meeting. We're just kind of catching up some of the work. What wasn't in your packet but is in your mailboxes is the letter from the Maine Municipal Association President, from Sophia Wilson, regarding our letter that we sent to them in regards to the nomination process. Additionally, in your mailboxes is the notice to municipal officers regarding the Lincoln County Budget Advisory Committee. We don't need to elaborate on that conversation from last year.
We actually have a representative on the committee, Mr. Hand.
Right, but we're more than welcome to send people to that discussion.
I think Mr. Hand should go get it.
Yeah, I think you should too. I agree. So then back on topic on reports, the Comprehensive Planning Committee met last on July 6th at 6 p.m. And the committee started prioritizing issues and is now working to put together a consultant RFP and a survey, which is pretty close. It's getting there.
July 6th or August 6th?
I said August. I don't know what you heard. So the committee's been meeting regularly on the first and third Mondays, and the last meeting was canceled just due to the other meeting that we had on Wednesday. So the next meeting is...
I'm assuming we won't have that one. That's Labor Day.
Right. And then also, Chuck, you probably saw that we're trying, since we couldn't get Christina Ford to come to our next meeting, we're trying to put together a session in which you and I and Nell, the vice chairman, can all talk to Christina before we lose her. Christina Ford's been working as a pro bono consultant, and then she'll leave for Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs here shortly so that she can teach greater minds than ours. But it's been nice to have her. Chuck, do you want to add anything on the Comprehensive Planning Committee since you were the chairman?
Just that we're coming along. It's going to be a long process, but I think that with the conversations that we've been having during the meetings, we'll have a good product to present to the people when it's all done.
The prioritization workshop was really fun. And if anybody's walked into my office and seen the really large stickies all over my office, that was what we were doing. We were trying to prioritize what were the issues that the Comprehensive Planning Committee came up with. And the thing that was most interesting to me was that probably the top 3 priorities were things that we considered priorities in the past. And the committee hasn't met yet to discuss that, but generally the consensus electronically was that they noticed the same thing, that infrastructure, education, and growth were like the 3 most important things, and probably on the lower tier was small town identity and rural appeal and things of that nature. So we've been approaching it in a different manner. It's very interesting to have that prioritization workshop. There's not much to report on the Industrial Park Planning Committee since they take backseat to everything else, and there's been a lot of everything else. But they're a pretty patient group, and I'm glad to see that Mike's here tonight because he also asked me, can we work on things while you're not available? And that's absolutely the case. They can work on things when I'm not available. I have just been acting as facilitator. I don't really actually have a defined role, except for that I put together meetings and get everybody in the same room. You guys do all the work. So we will try to probably work in that. I've already talked to staff about doing some other roles since we have lots of night meetings going on, and we'll probably have Amber start facilitating some of these night meetings to get them back on track. The Route 27 sidewalk project. This is interesting. So the town and our engineer, Owens McCullough from Sebago Technics, had a conference call with MDOT regarding the proposed sidewalk plan. And MDOT had lots of concerns. The width of the shoulder was a concern to them, that they wanted to see the shoulder extended out 5 feet. The first, and I kind of brushed upon this before, that they wanted us to maintain the 5-foot shoulder, and I actually had to show them pictures where it's not a 5-foot shoulder, it's 3 feet. So then after losing that battle, they decided they were going to make us submit a design exemption to their greater minds. So that's pending right now. It ought to be an interesting process. They're also suggesting that the curbing material be something other than granite because they want to cut down the costs. Now that was something that we locally had decided was very important to us, granite curbing. I know that probably loses Boothbay Harbor very quickly if it's not granite curbing, and we tried to make sure that that was clear to them, but once again, those are ongoing discussions. We proposed a flush curb and sidewalk north of the cemetery because there's a couple of businesses there that have these really large openings. MDOT didn't like that. They said it was unsafe. for the pedestrians to walk on a flush curb, and proposed that we elevate the curb to a normal. And in order to have that discussion, we brought the business owners in, and they weren't very happy about that. So we'll have to prepare, if MDOT makes us adhere to the raised curb and the raised sidewalk, then that may be something where we lose a little bit of support. But we had the conversation nonetheless. One of the things that I used as leverage is that we own the old animal hospital lot, and that if we could leverage that as a parking spot and get in a crosswalk that is less than the distance that we would ordinarily need, that maybe that's something they can move on. They were open to that, but the business owners weren't. They said that most people, for the businesses that they have, are not, it's not going to appeal to them to park across the street and cross Route 27, and I agree with them. But it's still an option that we may want to look into. They also proposed that a few of the entrances are longer than what is ideal for MDOT, one of which being Hammond Lumber's lot. So I met with the Hammond Lumber manager and told him, and he said it's already too small. So in all of these conversations we've gotten back to MDOT, and we've got the obligatory, we'll keep them in mind as we make decisions moving on, but I told them that these are things that we may start losing people on. Any questions about the sidewalk project? Because I mean, it obviously is at a critical point where we're not making all the decisions anymore.
Who else can you bring in to try to sway MDOT to our side of thinking? They need to be reasonable. I mean, they can't.
Has Bruce McDonald been active in this at all?
He has not, and I'm waiting to see what the design exemption says, because that's kind of critical. If the design exemption is not approved, we might as well flush the whole project, because then we can't afford it. It would push the back slope of the sidewalk into private land, which we would then have to either take or buy or get easements for, and that's not within our project budget. So, I mean, that's kind of the important one. Let's see what the design exemption says first. And I've made it clear to our engineer that all the things they're talking about could be deal breakers. Let's just see where they go, I guess. And I brought you guys up to speed on them. Department reports. I haven't come up with a better way. Maybe I need to type up the department head report as we have it. But once again, our department head meetings are 2:30, the same day as the selectmen's meetings, and anybody is welcome to join. We don't get into proprietary information there. We started the meeting off talking about safety and how we're going to start safety audits. And probably within the next month, we'll start doing safety audits of one another as departments. That's how we'll keep ourselves sharp as far as safety. Public Works, I don't think I have to tell anybody, but the paving is complete. Back River paving was done at the end of last week, and Butler Road was done on Wednesday. I caution some people that shouldering still needs to be done, and there's still some seeding and haying. So you're not looking at a finished product, but it does look black. And
They did a good job.
And it's
nice.
Smooth. And we're starting to get feedback, and a lot of people are happy with the way we did our work.
Who put the pictures on Facebook?
I did.
Good job.
As I was leaving town, texting and driving.
Mike said they like to wait a few weeks before they start doing the shoulder work,
Yeah.
because they have to drive our trucks right on the very edge of it.
Yeah. Still heavy truck, we would limit
So
it.
he said it would be probably 3 weeks before they start doing the shoulder.
Yeah, but the aprons, the driveway aprons, which
Oh,
seems
the
to be the
driveway
biggest
aprons,
thing
oh,
for
yeah.
most people, we'll probably be done those on Wednesday. But it's concerning to people to see a full road be redone in the manner that we've done it, because you have to do it in stages. So people that are driving into their driveway say, oh, do I have to deal with this 4-inch lip? No, you don't. You don't have to. We'll get to it relatively shortly. We'll be there. Any questions on the paving? I think it was a huge success. And once we do the calculations on money, we're going to try to get Crooker in here again sometime.
Gotta say, one thing with Crooker is they're in and out.
Oh yeah,
Very quick. They don't dilly-dally.
no, they were in and out, and I'll have to give our highway crew credit. They did a phenomenal job. They pushed the envelope as far as time and resources, and that road is built the right way.
A side note, I don't want to be the guy throwing the damn front things. I give them all credit. I think it looks great. But a lot of the crossings, just a little, the cuts, sleeving, culverts, whatever was done. I know the one on Butler Road was probably 3 months, 4 months, stayed open.
Yep.
I don't see where it cost any more to do it earlier or you know, pave those crossings before the final, the surface comes through. I did hear some flack about that. That's my only thing, is I don't see why you couldn't get King and Son here after they got 5 or 6 of those done, to get 5 or 6 of those complete. And then when they finally do the overlay, then it's all buttoned up and people don't have to drive through these 2-inch or 3-inch drops all the time. That's
No.
it. But no, I'm not trying to rain on everybody's parade. I think they did a great job.
No, you're right, and that has nothing to do with Public Works, that has more to do with my direction. I told them to wait until we had Crooker in town, because we had them under contract. And then after, we didn't want to, want to throw a monkey wrench into our relationship with Crooker,
Yep.
especially where we were just getting them back into town. And then when they got here, they're like, hey, if you've got somebody that does crossing work, we're not interested anyway.
Right.
So we learned the hard way that next time we'll just bring in somebody to do the crossings and the culvert work.
That's it.
Code enforcement, major projects are starting to get completed. Some of the major ones that I discussed, that we're trying to bridge the gap from old personnel into new personnel. There's a special planning board meeting on the 5th of September, where this is the planning board's idea to try to get some action on a project quicker, which I think is in the best interest of the town and the planning board. There's also a couple of notice of violations out there right now that we're processing. They're taking a little bit of time, but I won't get into the dynamics of them. Dan Breyer, I don't know if you guys have seen him, he's on board. He's coming up to speed relatively quickly. And we've sent the entire code office to some trainings, some internal plumbing trainings and some subsurface wastewater trainings. Assessing is still continuing to do a lot of pickup work. Sorry, I'm trying to get back on my notes. I've got that later. I'll get into that in a minute. But on Wednesday, Mike will be in like he always is, and he'll bring in Paul Burnett, and I don't know if you guys have met him yet, but he does a lot of the personal property and abatement stuff.
If you guys haven't had a chance to come in and meet Mike or Paul, I'd recommend that you do it. I stopped in one afternoon and had a very good conversation with both gentlemen, and I think as the public work with them, they're going to enjoy working with them. It's just their whole demeanor and attitude.
Yeah, they know more off the cuff than we could ever expect a single assessor to know, and they know it right off the cuff. Mm-hmm. Mike's kind of a stick in the mud, but Paul's fun. I'm glad that's on Channel 7. They'll see that. We also have them working on a mapping quote. One of the discussions we've had as we get the assessor on is that our maps not only are 5 years behind, but they're lacking some critical information. So I've said, you guys are the experts, you have a mapping department, tell me how much it costs. So they're working on that right now. The business office, I was supposed to figure out before this meeting taxes and how much we've collected, but we were on pace when I left last week. I mean, way ahead of pace actually. So I would envision that we're probably on pace for tax collection right now. It's slowed down a lot today. And then now we're prepping for election in the business office. Okay, next under reports, I wanted to have a frank discussion with the Board of Selectmen about a recent driveway permit that we had, and I think we have some people that are interested in that. We recently had a driveway permit. It was requested on Shore Road. We attempted to approve the driveway permit in the same process that we've always approved driveway permits, and did approve the driveway permit. And then an abutter hired an attorney to look at our process and pointed out some things that are big glaring holes in our process for driveway permits. Ended up having to rescind our driveway. Well, actually, we didn't. We didn't rescind the driveway permit application, but we did instruct them that they had to get an additional building permit for their driveway. There are definitely some things within our zoning ordinance that hinder the road commissioner's ability to issue driveway permits, and they don't really necessarily coincide well with statute, but they are local laws and they're stuff we have to adhere to. So I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for the applicant because they weren't allowed to do what they were told that they could do, and they probably lost a little bit of time and money in the process. And now that it's been pointed out that that permits need to go through this process, we can't ignore the fact that the process has holes poked in it, and we need to make sure that every driveway permit in the future is given the same equitable treatment. So it means that we need to change the way we issue driveway permits, which actually makes them much more difficult to obtain and a little more expensive.
Do we need to change the way we give driveway permits, or do we need to change the zoning ordinance?
Well, I can't. Essentially, what my change would be is the road commissioner would say that you can't get a driveway permit until you have a building permit that says you can build that. Just because the building permit is much more restrictive than anything that I go by guidance for road commissioner.
And why do you need a building permit for a driveway?
Right, which is one of the things that the lawyer pointed out in representing the abutter, is that a driveway is a structure per our zoning ordinance. All structures need to be permitted.
So if you take that out of there, that a driveway, how can you consider a driveway a structure?
I disagree with the ordinance and in statement, but that doesn't mean I can.
That sounds like a huge error. A
Yes.
driveway is not a structure.
You just can't pluck out one word and call it good.
No, the butter's attorney pointed these holes out. What did our attorney say?
Our attorney says you have to do what the law states. So they made a pretty good case for the fact that they were right, and I agree with them that they're absolutely right in stating that we don't have the authority to allow them to build what they wanted to build in that case.
I'm gonna go right back to the same thing I always go back to, Jim. Are there well-written ordinances out there someplace?
There are. There's a lot of well-written ordinances out there. I'm not sure I can classify ours as one.
That's what I glare at me all the time. Is there any possibility that we could see some examples or something of these well-written ordinances that I hear so much about that I don't ever see here?
The biggest problem, and I'm not saying this is right, because this is definitely wrong. The biggest problem is every time we rewrite our zoning ordinance, and we've done it 3 or 4 times over the last 10 years, every time we rewrite the zoning ordinance to make it work better, within a couple of years, we're running into this same sort of
I
problem.
understand we step on ourselves.
And each time that we rewrite the zoning ordinance, it goes through legal counsel before it goes to town meeting. And so,
And each time, excuse me, that your planning board does, they get examples in these things of perfect zoning ordinances that have been held up as examples to them from other towns. They do look at these, the people say this is a great example from other towns, and they review those when they make their changes and think they're coming up with the perfect.
Solutions.
I think we just need to write a zoning ordinance that uses common sense.
Right. If you take that one line out of there, does that do away with the problem?
It does away with a lot of the problems of this last applicant, but I mean, there's some other things that jump out at us. I mean, cuts and fills are.
And that's only one applicant, and that's only one bump in the road.
Right. There is a lot of work that could be done here, and I think that the only way we really get a good look at this is we have the people that are enforcing the laws give you a critique.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've sat down with Art and we've discussed a lot of these. You know, this is where we're handcuffed. This is where what Worden would give us some ability. The one thing that I think is missing in there is the planning board. It should have the authority to get past some of these laws if there's enough common sense past it. You know, this is the reason why the law is there, and if there's some common sense approach around it, then give them some authority to get past those.
I don't know how I'm gonna word this, I hope I can pull it off, but is it that our ordinances are just trying to be so stringent, so to take care of any gray area, they're gonna make it so perfectly black and white that there can't be any interpretation in there? I hate the word interpretation, good Lord. But I mean, a little bit of common sense by the town manager or the planning board. I mean, have they just tried to?
Eliminate that, the common sense portion.
Right, they've tried to take the common sense right out of it, and it's all gonna be by what this paper says. This paper says this, that's all there is to it. That's what the paper says, I can't do anything else because the paper says I gotta do this. Well, the paper's not always right.
Right.
Is there any way to kind of give freedom back into our ordinances a little bit of wiggle room, for lack of a better word?
There certainly is, without town meeting authority, no.
I understand that.
I would say put art to work.
And that's kind of what I would like to do. I think I can, one of the things that I'd like to do this winter with the Board of Selectmen's support is Art's going to go home and sit by his fireplace and enjoy retirement a little bit, and try to erase his memory of Boothbay. And I'd like to put him to work as a consultant in looking through our ordinance. The guy's got 15 years of code enforcement experience, and with my input of knowing what I've seen in the past 2 years of Boothbay, I think we could put together a pretty good proposal to bring to the Board of Selectmen to then forward on to the planning board. No, I wouldn't want the planning board to think that we're forcing anything on them. I just want them to be receptive that we're putting together what we think is a good proposal.
Once you have his recommendations, then it goes before both boards for their recommendations, really. I mean,
They
you
would go to
could,
the planning board before we get it. The planning board recommends to the Board of Selectmen. Mike?
I think I'd recommend that you back up one step. If you're gonna get involved in the review of ordinances, you need to have some public input, not at the end, during the process. We're doing it with the industrial park right now. There's a group of business people involved in that. We're gonna look at ordinances possibly. But I think you need to do the same thing with the town ordinances right now that appear in some cases to be overly restrictive. And, you know, a driveway being a structure doesn't sound right to me, doesn't sound right to any of you. Secondly, I think you need to address some of the problems at hand right now. And that's one. And can the town adopt something on an interim basis?
A moratorium, maybe?
A moratorium or something like that? To try to allow things to move forward rather than be bottlenecked and have to wait a year?
Moratorium to overrule zoning ordinance? I don't know, that's very skeptical.
but I'd almost disagree with you. I think that you have someone that deals with it every day, like Art. Go through it, hand draft. That's when you have your public comment, because all the things that we are all hearing and the complaining and the restrictiveness of it may go away without even having to open your mouth.
There's
You know
no
what I
way
mean?
that the way these ordinances are written, there's no magic. I mean, it's
No, I know.
this thick of some redundancy for one thing. There's overlapping of, you know, on this page it says this, 5 pages later it says that. The attorneys themselves are shaking their heads saying, what is
No,
this?
and I agree with you totally.
I mean, it's
but that's
that
where
bad.
someone like Art, looking at it, give him the first cut at it, and he may produce a product at the end that doesn't do anything, you know what I mean? But at least you got someone with 30 years worth of experience in other towns as well as ours.
He should be involved, but I don't think one person can fix this.
No, and
I
I
mean,
wasn't.
this is being sugarcoated right now. The problems that are in there are substantial. You could possibly stop building in this area with some of these rules. I mean, if a neighbor doesn't like what you're doing, they can bury a land use attorney in there and you're stopped. And that's not right. That's not a business-friendly community, which is what we're trying to achieve. I think something needs to be done sooner than later. I don't disagree with Art being involved because I think he's valuable, but I think there needs to be a group of people that work in these conditions. I mean, I was involved with this permit for months now. This has gone on for months and months. It's not a little bit of money that's been spent. It's a lot of money that's been spent. And I don't need countless hours. I don't even know, 20 plus trips down there. And then a neighbor comes out and points out that our own ordinances are so bad that there's no way you could ever do it. You know, and that's the truth. That's the long and short of it.
Essentially, we're not building our roads and our ditching our culverts according to our own rules, which, you know, I stumbled over, I think Steve will hopefully back me up, that we worked really hard to try to figure out the ordinance in his particular application, and we missed stuff that the land use attorney had to point out because it's so complicated.
Because that's what they get paid for.
Yeah, well, we get paid to
Yeah,
do
but I
our.
mean, it's easy to stir this.
It's there. Well, so
This is
if
so
it wasn't
easy.
there, they couldn't stir it.
Right. What we need to do is go back, you know, let's go back 10 years and look at what we had, because it was never this difficult. And now, with the economic times that we're in, if you lose a job because of a neighbor not liking what you're doing, that's costly to everybody. And we gotta stare this thing in the eye and fix it. And I don't think, you know, taking 5 years to redo this thing is gonna work. I think we need to look at it, find a reasonable solution in the interim, and then rewrite this whole thing in layman's terms, because anybody should be able to walk off the street, come in here and read the ordinance and understand it. And right now, I mean, I know I can't understand half of it, and Jim and I looked through, Dale's looked at it. I mean, you've all dealt with it at some time or another, and it's crazy. We need to fix it.
I have to say, Steve, that this version is actually better than the one we had 10 years ago.
Wow. We're in big trouble.
I was on
We're
the
in big
planning board
trouble.
10 years ago, and
Didn't they clean it
we
up?
attempted to clean it up a little bit. And
Well, I mean-
that's happened a couple of times since.
I understand that it's not an easy project, and I'm not expecting a miracle here, but, I mean, this is a serious problem.
Well, you know, some of the things that I picked up on, obviously, this driveway permit's one of them. The driveway being a structure keeps on rearing its ugly head over and over and over again.
The
I
same
mean, some
thing
of this
happened.
is just house cleaning, housekeeping, it's just a matter of cleaning up. Some of it is not, some of it's a lot more than that, I realize that. The tree cutters, that you have to have it's not an arborist, you have to have what's the person?
Forester.
A forester, you have to have a forester come down and take down one dead tree, because it's in shoreline, that's just,
And, you
lack of
know,
better words, asinine.
We've got a new code enforcement officer that I have all the faith in the world in, and I think he's gonna do a great job for us, but we gotta give him the tools. And if you bring him into this mess, he's just gonna get mired down in everything that the rest of the guys have been mired into. It's time to clean this up, you know? We got a good board here, we got a good town manager that's willing to work at it, let's do it, let's jump in and do it.
Yeah, but the question
Get it done.
is the how. I mean, I'm all for letting
I don't know how.
have a rough draft of coming up with some suggestions. I think what we need to do is pick up some of the real ugly ones right now and go with them first, and see if we can clean up the real ugly ones first.
We've got a good model here to go by, because
Well,
if you
that's-
just look at the simplicity of this project, and then how many ways it's wrong. I mean, it's a simple driveway.
Well, once it's not considered a structure, that takes half of the problems away, doesn't it?
Yep, yeah, but even the cuts and fills, like Jim is, I mean,
Yeah.
if you read through this stuff, it's impossible.
I mean, you can't
Because
fill within
everything's a
10
cut or a
feet.
fill.
You can't fill within 10 feet of the edge of your property. So what is there, a 20-foot trench between properties? I mean, that just doesn't seem right either. Grades I mean, we all know that we're fettered with ridge and rock and everything all through this town. And there's regulation on what the slope of those can be. One that the town would never measure, but it's been pointed out to us, so apparently we have to.
If you go around Shore Road, you'll see examples of the very same thing that this guy's trying to do. I mean, at every turn, there's an example of it, and some much worse.
So Chuck,
And then he gets to this place and he doesn't have a driveway. He literally has a building with no place to park and no way to even work on the building. And because of the way the codes are written, we can't put in a driveway. So it's, you gotta look at that and say, this shouldn't be. There should
I
be a
hate to say it this
solution.
way, it's gonna sound the pessimistic side of me, but you know what, if we gotta hold him to that kind of criteria, we gotta hold everybody to that kind of criteria, and if we
And
have to
that-
start telling people no, then we start telling people no, but that will solve the problem in short
Yeah,
order.
but you're gonna tell everybody no if you go by these.
I understand that.
And that's what we have to avoid, because then everything stops.
But that'll get the ordinances changed.
Please don't do that.
The reason why I proposed that staff work on an early edition is that we can move quicker. We can move quicker.
how
than
quick
any-
is quicker?
It's September. I'll have to talk to Art, but I know that Art and I can move pretty quickly when we don't have ties, and then we bring something back to the committee to then rip apart.
My
Go ahead.
question
I
is,
would think that it would boil down to this. If we have any mention of driveways in the ordinance, it should state that driveway permits are given by the road commissioner. And to build a driveway, you use best practices. That would seem, is that way off base, Stevie?
Not at all.
Chuck, that was the rationale that I was using when I approved the driveway permit, which was then.
When you have somebody that's willing to do that, you have a project, it could work that way, but then you have an ordinance that makes that impossible. You know, it takes his ability to look, and Mike Alley, who's been in the business, he knows how to build roads, he worked for me, he knows how to do these things. He looked at it and said, this, no problem. And because of the way the ordinance is written, you know, it's impossible. You can't get it through.
so I say if you can give Art a month to to point out, then you think so? To point out, he must have a general idea where the issues are besides driveways.
Well, I'm thinking in this case here, where it seems to be that we're all on consensus here, that this is definitely wrong. And it sounds like Jim was hitting it right on the head. What keeps us from having a change in the ordinance for November?
November? Time. Yeah, I'm gonna run out of, unless you're talking about just a simple change to the driveway.
Just a simple change to the driveway, so
That's a
this is
beginning.
wrong.
That's the
Yeah.
beginning.
If that's all-
Anything is better than nothing.
If that's all you got time for, that's all you can do, you gotta take them one at a time. Because to have a committee to look the whole thing over again.
Yeah.
is a lot of
I mean, we have a committee that looks over our ordinance, the planning board.
Mhm.
But the reason why it gets difficult for the planning board is they're looking at this mega document and they're a group of people. So I think that if we propose some changes and then have them attack our changes. Okay, this is the reason why we would propose this change, attack that instead of attack the entire ordinance, which then you get lost in the shuffle.
Well, it seems to me if we propose to them a change in the way driveways are done, based on this scenario, which would cover all driveways, from what the land use attorney is telling us, I would think that it'd be a no-brainer for them to go along and say, yeah.
But I'm still gonna say the driveways is only one part.
It is one part, but you have to begin somewhere.
Oh, no,
And
I'm
you
not
saw
saying
that-
I'm not saying not to do it.
You
I'm just
saw.
saying I think we need to keep the ball rolling.
Yes, right. I mean, it's down, you know, there's other building codes that are.
If we can get this one banged out for the November election, and we find some more, that'll get us up to May.
We ought to take care of the forester too while we're at it.
One other thing that really needs to be
No,
clarified,
it makes no sense.
it's very vague, is the 75-foot setback from the ocean. What can and cannot be done, what kind of permitting the town needs to provide for that. I understand that a DEP permit is one thing, but we've walked into code enforcement, and actually it was requested that we get over here immediately and pull this permit. Some people know about this permit, some people don't even know that this permit exists. So it's a hit or miss thing. It should be out there so everybody knows what's the right thing to do. We're happy to do the right thing as long as we know what it is. And it's, you know, you didn't know anything about that permit.
I knew it vaguely.
That's just it's one more thing in this, in that letter that was written back from, was it Pearson?
Yes.
The land use attorney, they pointed out that there was no dredging or filling or whatever inside 100 feet. Well, obviously that contradicts every other thing that we do because everybody works inside the 75-foot mark at some point if they're on the water. Right. There's a contradiction that needs to be.
There shall be no filling, dredging, or grading within 100 feet of the high water line.
And I've only seen it a
How do
million
you grade
times.
around the house that's built 80 feet back?
There you go. I mean, that
I
just
just
needs
need
to be
that.
taken out and thrown away.
And again, if that comes from the DEP regulations and DEP allows it, then even DEP says that it's not common sense.
This is a resource protection area law, but the way it's written into the ordinance, it applies to everything.
So it should not be written into that particular.
It should be resource protection only.
Yeah, a simple statement should say, this applies to resource protection.
Right.
There you go.
And Steve's pointing out what I was just going to say, if I give him enough time, he's going to also bring up 10 more of these, so
It's gotta be done.
it could just snowball continuously.
Why not just identify a list? I think, Dale, you have some ideas, Steve's mentioned some, maybe it's 3 or 4 or 5,
In our
but target those for November.
I agree.
Those are the problem areas, let's deal with those right now.
I suppose what we would want to try to do is come up with, I guess I would invite the contractors that have issues, that know the issues better than we know the issues,
Yeah.
to tell me what you're running into, so that we can come up with some realistic language.
My only thought is don't try to bite off too much for November,
Right.
otherwise we may not.
It won't make it.
So you can get something.
Does it have to go, does it have to go to a written ballot or a special town meeting? For zoning changes?
A special town meeting would be sufficient.
Yeah.
So if we had to, we could do that.
Matter of fact, when you're talking about November, I'm thinking that's a presidential election. Yeah, I don't know if I want to do anything there, but I also don't want to squash the importance. The presidential election gets to be a bear.
We need a special town meeting anytime, when they're not.
We may need a special town meeting for the water district anyway. We may need a special town meeting for budgetary issues. So, I mean, if we just start working on it, it might reveal itself when we're going to get this done. And at the same time, I need the board's blessing, I guess, to start ridiculing.
Yes. I think it's pretty much a given.
And there may be cost. I mean, if we're going to ask Art to get involved, then Art is not cheap.
No, but the problem is we've been facing these issues for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and they're not going away. They gotta go away.
Well, like I said, every time we rewrite the zoning ordinance, within a couple of years, items like this are popping up.
Maybe this is the way to do it, though. We pick out the ones that keep rearing their ugly head as being the first ones, or the ones that people stumble over.
Eventually they'll be looking at ours. It's the perfect one.
Right.
You get it.
Well, we try to think that our zoning ordinance should be some sort of perfection, but look at state law. There's amendments to laws every single year because you'll find things that work and don't work. And this is my characterization of the zoning ordinance, and no disrespect to the planners that worked really hard on it over the years, is that if you find a perfect piece and a perfect piece and a perfect piece and you put them all together, you might just be creating Frankenstein. I mean, just because it's a perfect piece here, you put it together with, so, you know, I'm sure they thought Frankenstein was perfect in pieces, but.
I think a very important thing it needs to be simple. It can't be overcomplicated, because when it's overcomplicated, interpretation comes into it. And that's when you lose control.
I think most people would argue with you, it's the other way around. I think when it's overly simple, interpretation comes into it. But I think we actually need some interpretation. I think we actually need to have a little bit of wiggle room that either our planning board or whoever's the governing body has a little bit of say, give or take one way or the other.
You
Common
do,
sense.
but the problem with that is if you give a lot of wiggle room, it also gives the freaking attorneys
I know.
wiggle room to
The
argue.
thing is if we were talking about rocket science, I'd agree. This is not rocket science. This driveway is a very simple thing. It shouldn't be difficult.
You say that, but it's how difficult it's been.
It's been very difficult.
And you had a bunch of people that build roads, standing there on a hill discussing, if we get to some hard rock that can't blast out, move it a little bit this way. And everybody was rational about it. But then we lost everybody when the lawyers got involved.
Right. Well, you said rational and lawyer in the same breath.
I wish Dan was here.
If we make it understandable and user-friendly, the lawyers shouldn't make any difference. They shouldn't be able to come in and just, I say that in a perfect world.
It may be too many differences
They'll
already.
find a crack.
No, it's up to me to represent the town's interests best, and I couldn't let this be built based on our ordinance and based on the reflection. So my apologies to the Rennies and their applicant, but
Jim, don't they have in the state of Maine a minimum standard definition of rules and regulations of stuff like that? I mean, have we gone beyond the point of we should be looking back to see what the minimum standard required by the state of Maine?
We really
And
don't have
then we turn around and go from there.
Well, the only minimum that's required by the state of Maine would be the shoreline zoning laws. And then
Maybe-
everything else on top of that is above and
Is an
beyond.
add-on, maybe we've added on too much over the years.
It's certainly worth going back and taking a look, but we do have zoning districts, and I don't think you'd want to get involved in changing too much of the scope of those districts, because people have bought property and have
I
expectations.
mean, there is some stuff in there that's pretty important to our peninsula. It really is. I mean, do I want a bar next door to my house? Probably not in a residential district. So you gotta have them. It's just not to that extreme.
And I mean, I would like to take a shot at it. I think Art and I together could probably take a pretty good whack at it, and then throw it at you guys to see what you think of our thoughts, and then if you like what we've done, then you can give it to the planning board for their review, and then they can do whatever they want. I know it's a little bit different approach.
Make it so.
Do you still want a list from contractors?
Absolutely. You can't do too much of this work for me, honestly, that's all I'm gonna say.
I know that.
If you say this is a big problem, then this is why, and you can even propose some language. I'm not gonna tell you that we're gonna take the language you propose, because we're business friendly, but we're not open up ourselves to onslaught. So yeah, I'll take any of the help I can get. That was a report, huh?